Shalom. This is Truth is Everlasting Lion Den. I am Yahweh Sab. I camp out with Lion Den, Hawan Ben Yashua in Jacksonville, Florida. But first, I have to give a prayer to the Father, to the Son, to the elders, to the archons, and to the women and children in Paleo Hebrew. Kau halayim la, Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai. Bahashem ha Rokah Kodash Mahamah. In the name of Yahweh Shai, in spirit, in holy, and in truth. Double honors to the 144,000 chosen elect. Double honors to the elders of GMS. Double honors to my elder Hawan. And salutation to the archons on the four corners of the earth. And to the women and children, Shalom. Okay, there's like a mini part 2. I found what you will call this, again, let me look at this, MP3 videotape from FamilyGuardian.org. Subject to military draft. Mike Lim. Draft. Okay? And the title of this lesson, You Have No Authority Over Me. Drafting is here. These are for the archons that have children, of age, that might have to look into a lawyer. And before you go to a lawyer, you might want to just pray in the name of Yahweh Shin Yahweh Shai. And just like the MOTV, when they're going to mandate, and we're going to have to say no, right? And let Yahweh Shai decide from there on. Okay, let me pray a little bit, and then we read a small part of the scripture. Here we go.
We're talking about how to refuse to volunteer for the draft. You may not think it's important right now. May only be a couple months before you'll realize how important this is for your own family members and loved ones and friends. So that's why we're sharing it with you. It comes from a retired U.S. Army officer, Dr. Graham, retired science instructor also. And he says here, no dodging, just refuse to volunteer. Here's how. Well, how can you refuse to volunteer? He's going to tell you. Here's what it says. I hope that you will not be offended if I tell how the draft works. I realize that most people think they know how the draft works, but in most cases they're in error. And you can avoid the worry when college in Canada will not be options, because in December 2001, Canada and the U.S. signed a smart border declaration which could be used to keep would-be draft dodgers in America. Well, they can't control the southern border, they tell us, and they've got to let all the terrorists in and the illegal aliens in, but they can sure control the Canadian border, can't they, folks, to keep the draft dodgers in. Anyway.
So wait, let me stop there for a minute, and let me read this, and then I'll let it play, okay? John chapter 19, verse 11, Yahweh shall answer, thou could have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivers me unto thee has a greater sin. Okay? So this is very serious. People are the one who turned Yahweh Shai into to Pontius Pilate. And now our children's, who have been calling the name of Yahweh Shai, need to hear this and pray to Yahweh Shai. Here we go.
He says here, being willing and eager to fight for one's country when it is truly in danger is one thing. Having the courage to refuse to fight in immoral and or unconstitutional wars is quite another matter. I believe, he says, ICE, no need to dodge the ball if they're not allowed to hit you with it, if you merely take your stand and refuse to volunteer. He says, number one, Mr. A, we're talking about an entity now called Mr. A, receives a draft notice and is told to report on a certain date in a certain place where he receives his physical and mental test. Then he is classified with a number indicating whether he is A1, that means the first call for the draft, all the way down to F4. Actually, it's 4F, which is unfit for duty. Now, Mr. A is told that he is to report for induction into the military and to appear at a certain military base for that purpose on a date specified. Number 3, by law, he must appear there. or a warrant for his arrest will be issued. Number 4, assuming he reports as directed, he will have another brief physical and test, and then he'll be told to line up on the yellow line painted on the floor. Here's where it gets real important, folks. Line up on the yellow line painted on the floor. Now, why is that? Well, number 5, a recruiting officer will then tell all those joining the Army, he says, or whatever, Marines, Navy, Air Force, to take one step forward. Well, those that just did this just volunteered to join the military. This is done so that no one can legally claim they were forced into involuntary servitude. And then you're told, raise your right hand and swear allegiance. Almost everyone does, thinking it must be required. They swear to, for example, you name your name, do solemnly swear that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States of America, and will defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and will obey the orders of the President, the officers appointed over me, so help me God, and so forth. Number 6, those who voluntarily step forward cannot now claim they were drafted. Very interesting. They stepped forward voluntarily and took the oath voluntarily. Now, number 7, assume there's a Mr. B, not Mr. A. This is Mr. B, and he's smarter than Mr. A. And he did not step forward and therefore did not take the oath of allegiance. The recruiter will probably say something like this: what's the matter with you? Don't you know what step forward means? Mr. B responds, sure I do, but I'm not volunteering to serve in the military. If you want me, you must take me against my will by force. I like Mr. B. I certainly do. Number 8, all those who volunteered will now be excused from the room, and Mr. B will be cajoled with persuasive arguments at first, and then, when nothing works to change his mind, he'll be called names, insulted, possibly even assaulted by more than one military personnel there in the room. Number 9, if Mr. B does not weaken, stands his ground, eventually the tormentors will give up and have him arrested on some charges. However, there is no lawful way that they can make him go into the military, because the constitutional prohibition against involuntary servitude, which is why no one is truly ever drafted and must be seduced and tricked into volunteering. This is Dr. Graham, retired military officer from the U.S. Army. He goes on to say, assume Mr. B is smarter than Mr. A. He did not step forward and volunteer, okay? All of these, all those that did volunteer, excused from the room, and they go through beating him up or calling him names and all this stuff. One thing to say at this point is that what the cops are coached at saying on the witness stand: am I ordered? Am I ordered to do what you say? If the recruiter says to you, this is Mr. B in the room they're talking to, Mr. B says, am I ordered to do these things? If the recruiter says no, then obviously you're okay. If the recruiter says yes, then you must say, by what authority do you, a military officer, order me, a civilian? If the recruiter says anything else, repeat the question until you get a yes or no. By what authority do you, a military officer, order me, a civilian? Keep repeating the question, am I ordered? And then if he says yes, go back to why, or by what authority do you, a military officer, order me, a civilian? And keep repeating that. If the recruiter says, I order you by the authority of the United States government, then go to this. Ask him this. Which clause of the Constitution do you, a military officer, order me, a civilian, to do anything? Another thing to say is, am I free to go? If the recruiter says yes, then obviously leave. If the recruiter says no, then ask this: am I under arrest? Am I a prisoner? Am I kidnapped? If I'm not free, then what am I? And keep asking these questions over and over until you get an answer. Another thing to say is, I like this one, I want an attorney. Yes, I think at this point, Mr. B may very well need an attorney. I don't know how this will work, folks. This is just sent to us, and we do appreciate that, but it sounds very interesting. I'll tell you why. I'm going to tell you in just a minute, because it seems to be in a U.S. Court of Appeals case of 1954, what I'm sharing with you here. Let's go on, though. Another thing to say at that course, Mr. B, of course, may want to say, am I free to go? Because if you get a yes, then of course you leave, and it would look bad arresting you after they told you that you're free to go. If you ask the question 3 times, am I free to go, and don't get a yes or no, then ask this question: well, I must be free to go because I asked you 3 times and you won't tell me I'm not. Then slowly turn around and leave. And if he keeps trying to interact, just keep on repeating the questions above. Now here's an excerpt from a book. The Army induction officer instructed the draftees to take one step forward as their names were called, and said that step would signify their induction into the Army. When Reluctant Willie, we're using the name Reluctant Willie here, when his name was called, he answered present, but did not step forward. After the ceremony, he went home instead of to a camp. When the MPs came for him, he went to court with a writ of habeas corpus to retain his freedom. The officer himself, Willie argued, said to step forward, and this would make me a soldier. As I didn't take the step, I'm still a civilian, and the Army has no claim on me. Counsel for the Army replied, the Army isn't being run by childish games. Willie and 100 others appeared to be inducted, and he was inducted before the whole group, as any fool could plainly see. Now, Willie retained his civilian status. The court ruled that the draft law required some definite ceremony to transform a civilian into a soldier. As the Army decided to have one step forward constitute the ceremony, and Willie didn't take the step. Therefore, he wasn't a soldier. This allegedly, by this U.S. Army retired officer, he says it came out in the U.S. Court of Appeals case 1954. Now, folks, that's all there is to it. It's not documented. It is not verified. We would have to do research, and I hope some of you out there will help us with this, because we work extremely long hours here at the Officer Jack Nicolam program, and then our 2 sister police and military organizations. We volunteers put in 14, 15, 16 hours a day here, volunteering our time, and we don't have time to go down and research this U.S. Court of Appeals case 1954 that has to do with Army induction and the draft, the legalities of Army induction, or military induction, it might very well say, but this seems to be an Army case that they're talking about here, and the draft, okay, the legalities of it. The U.S. Court of Appeals, 1954. I would certainly hope somebody out there would get on their computer or head to a law library and see if they couldn't find such a case. That's all I know. We don't even know at this point who this, I'm hoping that this is true, that this is a Dr. Graham, retired science instructor and retired military officer from the U.S. Army. We don't know. This just came into us. We're researching it a little bit. It came in from a friend named Monk. We're trying to follow up on it, find out more about it. But if indeed there is a Court of Appeals case 1954 that says that there is a ceremony, and if you don't participate in the ceremony, then you're not inducted into the military. This would be a very important case, don't you think? So we need people to do research into this and contact us here at Aid and Abet Police Military Newsletter. And I'll give you our address and our phone number here, okay? The address is HC, that's like Hotel Charlie 11, Box 357, Kamiah, K-A-M-I-A-H, Idaho 83536. That's HC, like Hotel Charlie 11, Box 357, Kamiah, K-A-M-I-A-H, Idaho 83536. Our phone number is 208-935-7852.
I hope that this was edifying, and with that I'll say Shalom.